I need an opinion. How do you say that socialism is immoral? All conservatives' later counter argument is that stealing money is immoral. I agree. I think stealing money is immoral. Therefore, socialism is good because it stops the theft of your hard-earned dollars. Your bosses steal money from you every fucking day that you go to week. Actually, you know what? It's theory time, baby. I think that a good introduction to theory for some of you, as a Squirrel, a friend of the show, Squirrel, posted, is by what's his face? It's Harvey, right? No, not a new segment, but here it's like people that constantly ask about people that constantly ask about theory, look no further. Okay, fear no more. Here it is. Hold on, let me just pull this shit up for you. The game theory. No, this is at the heart of. Here. This is at the heart of Marx's theory lies the labor theory of value. This will describe that concept fairly well. Okay, here, in simplified terms.
Confused about what Marx was about. They think he wrote about communism. Was that only a tiny amount of what he wrote was about a future communist society?
This is actually about capitalism.
Or more of what he wrote was about capitalism. So it's his analysis of capitalism that people are interested in because of the problems that we're facing at the moment, and that's why it's pertinent. And if you like, I can take you through his theory of crisis, which is the kind of central bit that's pertinent to what we're...
Yeah, that'd be fantastic if you could, yeah.
Well, if you stand over there, and I'll tell you all about it, right? It starts with the labour theory of value, okay, which was not something that Marx invented. This is from Ricardo and Smith, classical economists of the 18th and 19th century. But basically, the labour theory of value says that only people make and create value, right? Machines or flip charts have value, they have use value, okay, they are useful things, but the flip chart on its own can't do anything, okay, it can't create more value than it has. The only thing that can create more value out of the flip chart is if somebody does something with it, somebody does something with it.
That's why I always say there is no value without labor, right? If you have a boss and that boss, let's say, magically has a fucking factory and magically we transported wood to that factory, all that boss has without actual labor, without actual people working on those fucking piles of wood, turning it into chairs, is just a factory full of wood. And a lot of times that depreciates too. I'm saying magically, the factory doesn't even build itself, obviously. There's labor associated with that too. Okay. What about automation? Asks a chatter. Well, automation also means that there's still people building the robots, just like there's people building the fucking factory. That's why at the heart of all value still exists labor. You cannot have any sort of value without labor. I said automation. Automation. Did I say automation? Automation. What? Oh my God, my brain. Okay.
So that's the basic idea of the labour theory of value. Now, what I'm going to take you through is a very rapid distillation of a pile of books this high. Okay, so the pure Marxist scholars that might happen upon this will probably be appalled at the way I'm simplifying things, but in order to get the essence of the arguments over, I'll do the best I can. If we assume this is the working day, okay, it can be divided up into two component parts. All right. Now, this is the average working day. So if you look at it across the global economy, that'll be times, I don't know, 3 billion or however many people are working. Okay. Now, this part here we call the variable capital. This is we start at 9 o'clock. By about 2 o'clock, okay, I have created enough value to pay for my wages. Okay. All the time that I then work for the rest of the afternoon is creating what Marx calls surplus value. Right? Now, surplus value is the source of profit. Okay. And clearly, if this line can move, depending on various changes in the economy, which I'll briefly explain in a moment, People.
You following up correctly so far? Labor theory of value is not a Marxian concept. Originally, it's Ricardo and Adam Smith, and it's simply an expansion of those previous concepts. It's also not. It's also not like fully descriptive. It's also very difficult to calculate purely the value, the surplus value that you bring. Like the value that your labor actually creates, it's different. It's entirely different than what classical economists believe in nowadays, where their opinions revolve around marginal utility. Now, neither of those things are exact sciences, and it's still made up because there is no way to perfectly figure out what value is. Right? There's no way to perfectly figure out what value is. Like, I mean, the difference between ice cream, for example, in the summer versus ice cream in the winter, it can change. If you're an incredibly thirsty person, if you're in a fucking desert, water is incredibly valuable to you. But we don't price it out that way currently. It's an entirely subjective thing, right? You love ice cream. And in the middle of a hot summer day, you want to have ice cream. The value of that ice cream is actually much higher than in the middle of the cold winter when you don't want to have fucking ice cream, or you might not be the kind of person that even enjoys ice cream. So economists try to figure out what exactly the value of a thing is. Yeah. Regardless of how relative of a concept it is. No, that just means that value is a function of something that includes temporal context. Who the fuck doesn't enjoy ice cream? Ban them? Anyway, let's keep going.
Ratio of these two, S over V, Marx calls the rate of surplus value. And we'll see how this is crucial in a moment. Okay. That's the first thing. Now, the rate of profit, which is the crucial measure here, is surplus value over variable capital, which is the amount that's funding the wages here, okay?
How much your boss takes away from you in the form of profit versus how much you put back in to justify the wages that you get, plus...
And this thing here called C, which Marx calls constant capital.
Constant capital, as in the depreciating assets that previously existed in the corporation itself, like the factory, like the robot arm that you might be using, or a computer that your boss gives you or your company gives you that you're using, that you yourself personally might not have had enough money to purchase.
Now this is machinery, it's bought-in material, okay, it's leather, it's whatever it is we're working with, okay, paper, all right? The reason he calls it constant capital is its value does not change, okay? It is what it is, which comes back to this basic idea of the labour theory of value. Now, his theory of crisis is based on what he calls the law of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall over a business cycle, right? Now, why it falls is actually the nub of the argument, okay? He says due to competition in markets, the capitalist, the owner of the business, can't fritter away all this surplus value in luxury expenditure, right? A significant proportion of this has to be reinvested to protect himself from competition and to gain a march on competitors. Now, because of technical improvements in the way we make things, okay, the productivity of labour has improved dramatically over the years through the introduction of machines.
Yes, there is depreciation as well. It doesn't stay constant. Obviously, this is not like a fully flushed out. In order to fucking make a reductive argument, in order to contextualize these sorts of concepts, of course you're gonna fucking drop certain things that occur in reality. This is an oversimplification. It's kind of like at the heart of the supply demand curves that you put together, right, in a free market, lies the rational actor making rational choices when no such being exists. When we have, for example, a multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to making people make irrational choices. It focuses on the causal variables, so SOF relevance, what? Relevance while neglecting those that aren't relevant.
Machinery.
Yeah.
Now, machinery is this bit here, all right, the constant capital. Now, over time, as the businessman invests, the ratio of constant to variable capital increases. There's more machinery working with the individual laborer.
What he's basically talking about here is something that you can apply to automation as well. Like pretty much in an effort to become more competitive, you're reinvesting the profits that your workers have fucking created for you. Let's say you're a business owner, okay? You've hired a bunch of fucking people, and obviously you're underpaying them. That's what is known as profit, right? And it's totally justifiable in our current understanding of the economy. So you take that profit off the top of every single fucking worker, all right? And you reinvest it. Oftentimes you reinvest it back into your own business so you can be competitive with other businesses that are trying to come into your territory. And that competitiveness manifests itself in automation, for example, that actually increases productivity, right? Automation increases productivity tremendously. If you were an accountant, for example, in the accountant factory, you used to fucking have to use an abacus and pen and paper. Now, boom, fucking 100 years later, you have a computer. Your productivity is increased by 1,000 million-fold, maybe, okay? All of a sudden, you're fucking crunching numbers like crazy. You have a calculator, or you have a fucking computer with a built-in calculator. You no longer need the abacus. Now you're fucking cranking out 1,000 of these fucking things that previously you were able to do only one or two. Your productivity is skyrocketed. The constant variable there has obviously increased as well, because now you have Excel that you have to pay for. Now you have a laptop that you need to pay for. You couldn't get it on your own. You couldn't become an accountant on your own. However, the rate of profit is increasing on top of that. Your surplus labor value is increasing on top of that. And the value that you're generating for the corporation that justifies your the value that you're generating for the corporation is increasing, whereas the value that the corporation is paying you is decreasing.
Okay, and then you can see this manifested in process industries, for example, where you just see a massive pipe work and about two blokes with a hard hat in the corner. I mean, that would be an extreme case, but the general tendency is still there to replace living labour, which is the V bit, with what he calls dead labour, which is the constant capital.
Software does most of it and you just double check things? Yeah. No, for sure. The topic you were talking about, when different terms are worth more in different situations, is known as demand. Are you just throwing words out? No, I'm not. I know he sounds a lot like Sacha Baron Cohen, by the way. I can't get over it. But so a crucial concept is introduced here, central to Marx's critical analysis of capitalism and theory of crises, the law of tendency of the rate of profit to fall over a business cycle through the increase in the ratio of constant variable capital, machines replacing the labor. So now we have the core concepts and how they function as a part of a broader framework. Recent research by Piketty has confirmed living labor is being replaced by dead labor at a high rate. Now let's move on to the next step. So how does this lead to a crisis? So now you have automation. Now you have machinery replacing the fucking the labor that you were doing. Obviously, in earlier eras of industrialization, you have so many different fucking people that are sitting on an assembly line and working on an assembly line. Now you don't need that. Now you've automated most parts of that. With literally the profits that those motherfuckers originally on the assembly line generated for the corporation. So you are working in the factory. You're working in the racism factory because, of course, you're a white working class laborer. So obviously your output is racism, right? And you're doing the racism on the assembly line, and all of a sudden, all of the additional surplus labor value is still accumulating at the top, and your boss is like, all right, we're going to find a better way to do racism now. Okay? We're going to find an automated process to automate certain parts of the racism. Now the output's even fucking higher. Now you as an individual have the capacity to create even more racism. Okay? You have even the capacity to produce even more racism, and yet your boss is like, all right, well, we don't fucking need some of these racists now, so we're going to fire off some of these racism factory workers because we don't need all of that. We don't need these people to work anymore.
Time, through this process of accumulation, which is not an option for a capitalist, he has to do this, okay? This ratio, C over V, which he calls the organic composition of capital, not a particularly helpful term, but that ratio increases over time. Now, here's the trick. If we now divide through this equation here by V, okay, we then get S over V divided by C over V plus 1. Okay, now, if this increases, as we've just explained, over a business cycle, and this ratio, the ratio of surplus value, or the rate of surplus value, if that increases at a lower speed than this, then overall this equation, which is the rate of profit, okay, that goes down. Right. Now, he calls it the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. There are counteracting influences which can delay the onset of this effect. One of them is if you have improvements in productivity in wage goods producing industries, the amount of value that's needed to pay wages, if you like, or to feed the workers, etc., can reduce. So that line can go that way. So surplus value can increase. You can increase this by speeding up production lines. So the individual hour of the worker's time produces more stuff. You can, in fact, extend the working day, as France has done recently. They tried to reduce it, they've had to extend it because they're not competitive with the reduced working day. And foreign trade and globalization, as other things that Marx suggested, can reduce the tendency of this to fall. But, and what's happened in the current situation, in my view, is that we've delayed the onset of this because these are all value terms based on labour time. These are not money terms, okay? And if you've expanded credit, which they have done over the past 8-10 years, then you can delay the monetary expression of the falling rate of profit. But the underlying, and this is Marx's method, okay, the underlying structure of the economy is reflected here, not in the money appearance of the economy.
Why is Half a Chat crying? Why didn't they want a theory stream? I don't know. I feel like I feel like it's still not exactly easy to describe. I think that I don't know if this is like as good. But
is
here
this?
We've come to the crucial part. If the ratio S divided by V increases at a lower rate than C divided by V, living labor being replaced by dead labor, the rate of profit goes down. That's it. That's the logic of capitalism. But it's a tendency because there are counteracting influences, and then the crisis hits.
The crisis causes businesses to go bust. Okay. There's also consolidations within industries where firms combine together. Sometimes in some process industries, there's mothballing of plants, right? Now what that...
So all businesses under a capitalist organization of the economy operate to monopolize as best as they can. Some businesses is a little bit easier because there is a natural barrier of entry, like, robust capital needs to create a fucking nuclear power plant, for example. You can't be a utility provider if you don't have a fuckload of money ahead of time that you can build a factory. Or ISPs do this by relying on publicly funded infrastructure, right? You need roads. You need those fucking... you need roads to be built. You need you need infrastructure so you can, pump your data through. I'm just using really reductive terms. But ultimately, all businesses want to monopolize. That's why without regulation, without some sort of government regulation, everything is going to turn into Amazon. What does Amazon do? They fucking outcompete by pricing the products that they are hosting on their website to a level that is like impossible to fucking compete with as a smaller business. They oftentimes then they destroy the competition this way and then increase the price if they want to, as long as it doesn't go high, as long as it doesn't go above a certain line where like people are frustrated by it and people start recognizing it, then they're fine. Then they're able to do whatever the fuck they want, and they can ruin conditions on the back end because the consumer is not being impacted by it to justify the lower prices. Okay, that diaper site they took like a 40 plus million loss for a month to wipe them out. Yeah, exactly. That's the way that, and due to the financialization of our economy, all of these companies start sucking one another up. They do vertical and horizontal integration, where they will either go and like buy the factory that produces the product if you're a retailer, or they buy the fucking logistics operation in between. Amazon building out its own like delivery infrastructure is another example of this. Walmart does this as well, like making their own, producing. You're no longer a retailer now you're also fucking expanding vertically on different parts of the supply chain, so you control every part of it, every aspect of this. You can do it horizontally as well by purchasing other companies that are competitors in the field. This is how every single company in America has become one mega corporation for the most part. That's why most commodities that you purchase when you go to a Ralph's, for example, is owned by six fucking multinational corporations that produce them. There's like a million different diverse products that you can choose from, but a million different diverse products that you can choose from are still being created by six mega corporations, right? Now, there are certain rules set in place to stop this from happening. Like, well, there's still six corporations. That doesn't mean it's a monopoly, Hasan. Yes, it is what is known as an oligopoly. Now, in oligopolies, if like P&G and I don't know what's another fucking commodity producer, like out of the six companies that make all this shit, like Nestle and P&G or Unilever, it got together, okay, and went, and their CEOs sat in a fucking dark room where there's a cigar smoke everywhere, okay, and they were smoking their big Cuban cigars and said, hey, you see, we are going to increase the prices of our product. You should do the same. That would be considered price fixing. That, my friends, is illegal. But what can they do instead of price fixing? Well, what they can do, I shouldn't use Nestle and Unilever and whatever. I should probably use like, I should probably use the analogy of ISPs or maybe even, ISPs is better. So AT&T can expand, or Time Warner can purchase Charter, and then Charter can purchase another company and then turn into Spectrum, right? They turn into Spectrum, so that's horizontal and vertical expansion occurring right there. But then they turn around and fucking and follow suit when Verizon decides to change their prices. And this is exactly how they can fuck you over in a process known as price leadership and not price fixing. The difference between price fixing and price leadership is one company decides to act and then the other companies follow suit, because they can do that in an oligopoly and it still would not be considered illegal. Whereas if they were to sit in a dark room and decide this is what we're going to do with our prices, then that would be illegal. Okay? A lot of what occurs under capitalism or under Western liberal capitalist democracies basically is just legitimizing and normalizing things that you would otherwise consider to be indecent. The difference between price leadership and price fixing is a perfect example of this, just like the difference between bribery and campaign contributions are a perfect example of this. campaign contributions are considered legalized bribery, but because it's legal, it's justifiable and good. Bribery, on the other hand, well, that's unacceptable. That's really bad. I mean, those barbarians, they're the ones who are doing bribery. That's fucked up. We don't do that here. We have lobbying. We have an entire industry where we can bribe our politicians to represent our interests over the interests of the people. So that's basically what we do here in the Western world, and that's why we have this like supremacist attitude. Okay. So a simple example is competing gas stations on the same corner of the road. One gas station raises their prices, and then the other one across the road follows an hour later. Yeah.
What that does is it takes C out of the system. Constant capital is then taken out of the system. So this reduces. As businesses go bust, the reserve army of unemployed, as Marx called it, increases. That places downward pressure on wages, okay? Because people are competing for jobs, they'll take a job at a lower pay, etc. And what that does is it reduces V.
Or another thing that we have in America is crippling loans that you need to take to become a competitive person in the labor market, okay? At the international level, we are trying to outcompete the labor market of other countries. And also at the domestic level, we are trying to compete with one another. And that's why you go to college, because it's the only way that you can have upward social mobility. And the only way to go to college with the insane fucking prices is if you take out a fat loan. So now you have a fat loan that you need to pay the fuck off. Those loans transfer over to your fucking family if you don't pay it off. That's insane, right? Those loans that you took when you're at the age of 17 to get upward social mobility are now transferring to your fucking family if you don't pay it off, even if you fucking die. So, what do? Well, you suck it the fuck up and you take a job that you normally otherwise would never take, regardless of whether you are overqualified for it. And you take that job that has no benefits whatsoever, that doesn't even have like applicable like field like the qualifications that you learned in fucking college. And that's another way that you apply pressure to the labor force and subjugate them to a lifetime of wage slavery, pretty much.
Okay, so if we've reduced that and we've reduced that, then overall that equation gets restored, the rate of profit recovers, and then we're back on another cycle of accumulation. Which might last 10 years, 15 years, who knows? You can't predict with any degree of certainty here. But that's the basic theory, okay? And that's maybe why people are looking to buy Das Kapital.
Okay.
And eventually, it all falls down, and that's the
We're just
degree of certainty here. But that's the basic theory, okay? And that's maybe why people are looking to buy Das Kapital.
In these periodic crises, which are intrinsic to capitalism, constant capital is destroyed while unemployment reduces variable capital, restoring the balance. However, what is not mentioned there, but Marx did note, was that these crises will only get worse over time. Now, I believe Marx in his essence was correct in his analysis of capitalism and its logic, and it's asinine to pretend otherwise. We are witnessing firsthand how constant capital is rapidly replacing variable capital in the form of AI and automation, as Squirrel also mentions, which means that ever greater crises await us in the near future, and the means by which they can be diminished and the balance can be restored are becoming unavailable. So one of the main criticisms of Marx's analysis, for example, is the fact that the inevitable contradictions that I've also described between workers and bosses, those who own capital, that I've described in simple terms as like a worker wants to work the least amount of hours for the most amount of pay. The boss wants the worker to work the most amount of hours for the least amount of pay. And therein lies a contradiction that is unsolvable under capitalism, especially when the bosses get all of the surplus value of your labor, as my man described over here. Marx thought that these problems would inevitably, these inherent contradictions would inevitably lead to economic collapse. However, what we could not have foreseen at the time was the welfare state, social democracy, and what the state will do to basically soften the blow of these times of economic crisis in an effort to continue capitalism. Get it? And that's where the state props up these inevitable, the inevitable ends of that crises that we speak of, where the state will continue through welfare reform and through certain policies that are capitalist organization of the economy. Okay? Now, we've gotten to a certain point, reminds me of the housing bubble, we've gotten to a certain point where, like, we're so buck wild. Our state is so buck wild that in the aftermath of the housing crisis, for example, instead of paying off those mortgages personally, the state decided to literally fucking pay the banks. And in which case people that fucking got those houses were still evicted. Okay? With certain conditions on how you could use those loans, even though the banks, of course, did not follow a lot of those conditions. The reason why they could do this, the reason why they can openly do this, is one, because it's convoluted. It's a complicated concept to understand. And part of the reason why they can do this is because you have no way to push back. Because what are you going to do? There's no way that you could potentially put together an organized unit of workers to collectively bargain for your better interests. There is no way that you can actually fight back against this. And what I'm referencing isn't even what Republican administrations have done, even though Republican administrations have been responsible for a lot of this cruelty. Democratic administrations have done this as well. I mean, Obama's recovery efforts is a great example of this. Neoliberal Democratic administrations have also have also exacerbated the cruelty that you experience. Now, I believe Marx in essence was correct in his analysis of the case, which means that ever greater crises await us in the near future, and by means that can be diminished and the balance can be restored or becoming unavailable. And some among the bourgeoisie know it, which is why they're pushing neoliberal UBI proposals. The only thing we don't know is whether they'll be successful in creating some kind of neoliberal hellscape where most can barely survive through some UBI while they live as kings, or whether we'll go extinct through climate change or, socialism. The full video by Cliff Bowman. The best video intro, some sorts of Marx core economic policies is right here. We can watch the rest of it too if you want. Kind of on topic, Nestle is in the news today for defending child slavery in front of the Supreme Court. Nice. U.S. Supreme Court Justice on Tuesday appeared wary of barring lawsuits against American companies over alleged human rights abuses abroad, but signaled they could toss out a case accusing Cargill, Inc. and a Nestle S.A. subsidiary of knowingly helping perpetuate slavery at the Ivory Coast cocoa farms. Another part is palm oil, right? That's like a really horrifying. The conditions that people that Neil Katyal, listen to his court hearings. That shit was funny. You got to hear the audio Twitter feeds. Yeah, the lawyer that is arguing on behalf of the megacorps here was Obabe's Solicitor General, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I was showing. Environmental disaster from palm oil production. Yeah. What about people like you that make decent money on this platform? We are the true evil. People like myself are actually the real problem. Nestle that is, utilizing child slavery, for example, that's just regular capitalism. me describing that regular capitalism to you in a palatable way, and also getting money as a consequence of that because you find my labor in this way to be useful and also entertaining. Well, no, I am the real problem, actually, not Nestle, because I don't know why, actually. I don't know why you would literally look at that and think that, like, even after everything that I've just described to you, that I am the fucking real problem. Yeah, but you're a champagne socialist. Stop pretending you're a Marxist. Yeah, I don't really care. Yeah, I am a champagne socialist. Here, I'm literally drinking Fiji water right now. Yeah, I like luxury items too. Despite the fact that I don't really use a lot of luxury items, I think that people should be able to have them. As a matter of fact, I think no matter what the economic organization we exist under, there should be some form of hedonistic interest that soothe the masses. So. Sockdems perpetuate the system of oppression but give out temporary band-aids to make it tolerable. Yes, but there is still a necessity for a transitional social democratic state. And also, no matter what the fuck you talk about, there is not a single country on this planet that does not agree with me, including the Dengist favorite, China. Okay? Yeah, go ahead. I just triggered the fuck out of the tanky nerds. Even if you are looking at China from the most charitable, even if you are looking at China from the most charitable fucking Marxian economist perspective, point of view, that's still a social democracy at this moment. It is not a transitional socialist state, it's a transitional social democracy. So there you go, Dengist. Suck my dick. Anyway. Are you proposing an eventual end to democracy? What? No. I'm proposing more democracy. Oh, also, I didn't run the ad before, but I'm going to run it now. Forgot. Here, I'll show you this chart real quick as well, but top of the hour every hour, there's a 60-second ad break. We're running it right now. Shut the fuck up. All you know is porn star vagina and be bad at video game, yet you're rich. What the fuck? Lockdowns are, at least in Sweden, closely connected to the collective bargaining movement and the trade unions. They went centrist to cope with popular support because nationalism and tribalism are such strong forces. The outrage be fucking livid? What? Here, wage theft is when employers steal from employees. Other types of theft yearly. Data from the United States: larceny, burglary, auto theft, and robbery, which is the tiniest part of it. But overtime violations, rest break violations. I think this is from the Labor Bureau statistics, right? Off the clock violations, minimum wage violations of the tune of 23.20 billion. None of that is considered to be. None of that is prosecuted with the same level of aggressiveness as this. I agree that a transitional period of equivalent to social democracy or market socialism is needed, but I still hate Stockton's because I think the transitional period should be permanent. And it just defeats the whole purpose. They're so close but fall so short. Why do some leftists care so much about the name of their ideology when the end goal is always a communist society? I don't. Well, that's not true. The end goal isn't a communist society for some leftists. What is the best way to abolish capitalism in the U.S. when so many of our jobs and products rely on the international supply chains of private corporations? Welfare is still good. Yeah, I don't. I'm a firm believer in I'm a firm believer in making gains wherever you can and trying to reduce the harm that the working class is subjected to. Anywhere that you can make material gains is good, is a positive. In America, especially, social democrats who at least know enough to consider themselves social democrats are still absolutely fucking aligned with my interests. I don't know if they're not aligned with yours, but I don't know what your fucking interests are, what kind of delusional worldview you have, especially when considering the fact that Bernie Sanders himself ran basically with modest social democratic reforms. So, the DOJ is what?